She was starving, barefoot, and begging for leftovers. He was a billionaire CEO with everything, except a son who hadn't spoken in 2 years. So when the poor girl pointed to the silent child behind the glass and said, "If I can make him talk, will you give me your scraps?" He laughed. But then, the boy opened his mouth and said one word that shattered everything. Every morning, before the sun had fully stretched across the city skyline, Lila perched herself outside the towering steel gates of the Calderon estate. Wrapped in her brother's old coat and carrying a worn canvas bag, she waited for the cook to toss out scraps from the kitchen. Some days it was stale bread, other times half-eaten fruit, but it was food. And for Lila and her grandmother, it meant survival. The Calderon mansion was a world she only knew through the iron bars, an opulent labyrinth of fountains, trimmed hedges, and men in suits who never looked her way. Except for one pair of eyes. Every so often, a boy watched her from a window on the second floor. Pale, slight, no older than 7, with an eerie stillness about him. Lila smiled once, waving shyly. The boy didn't move. Not a blink, not a nod. Just stared. Then one afternoon, as the cook passed by and flung a plastic container near the trash, Lila sprinted to catch it. A heavy car rolled past the gate, slowing briefly. Inside, a man in a charcoal suit watched her, tall, neatly bearded, eyes dark with calculation. It was Xavier Calderon, the CEO of Calderon Holdings, and the father of the silent boy. He turned his gaze to the house and drove on. Lila opened the container. A few meatballs, mashed potatoes, and a buttered roll. Her chest swelled with relief. She stuffed the bread into her bag, then glanced up. The boy was still there, watching her like a ghost through glass. The next day, rain pounded the sidewalks, turning the gutters into streams. Lila still came, soaked and shivering, but she waited. The cook was late. After an hour, the gate opened, not the side entrance, but the main one. 2 men emerged with umbrellas. One of them was Xavier. He didn't seem surprised to see her. In fact, he stopped a few feet from her and gestured toward the main door. "You. Come with me," he said. Lila's heart pounded. "Why? You've been lurking here long enough. I'm not fond of strays, but my son." He paused, his voice tightening. "He watches you." She hesitated. "Is he okay?" "He hasn't spoken a word in 2 years. Trauma, the doctors say. Nothing helps." Xavier's eyes narrowed. "Yet he watches you." Lila wiped her nose with her sleeve. "If I make him talk, will you give me leftovers? Real ones. For my grandma too." The CEO chuckled, a short, humorless sound. "If you make my son speak, I'll give you the entire kitchen." And just like that, the gate swallowed her whole. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and lavender. Lila's shoes squished on the marble floor as she followed Xavier down a long hallway. He opened a door to a softly lit room filled with toys, books, and a child-sized table set with puzzles. The boy sat on the rug, legs folded, staring at a wooden train. When he saw her, he blinked slowly but didn't flinch. "This is Mateo," Xavier said, arms crossed. "Say anything, do anything. I don't care. Just try." Then he walked out and closed the door. Lila knelt carefully a few feet from the boy. "Hi. I'm Lila." No response. She inched closer. "You're Mateo, right? I see you in the window. You've got a nice room." Still nothing. But he didn't look away. She pulled out the buttered roll from her bag. "You like bread? I was gonna eat this later, but I'll share." She tore it in half and placed it near him. Mateo didn't touch it. Instead, he slowly pushed the wooden train toward her. Then waited. Her heart thudded. She pushed it back. He smiled faintly. Hours passed. No words. No sounds. Just quiet company. That night, Xavier said nothing as his assistant escorted her out. She left with a warm bowl of stew and 2 sealed containers. The next day, she returned. And the next. Mateo started handing her toys, stacking blocks for her to knock over. He even drew her a picture, 2 stick figures under a crooked sun. One had long hair. Still, he didn't speak. But he watched. Closely. Intently. On the 5th day, Xavier appeared again. He won't talk, he said flatly. Doctors say his voice box is fine. It's in his head. Lila looked down at the drawing Mateo had made. He's listening. That's something. Xavier gave a tired sigh. I don't need something. I need him back. The next day, Lila brought something with her. An old toy piano she'd found in a neighbor's trash. A few keys were broken, but it worked. She played the first tune she ever learned, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Mateo froze. His lips parted slightly. He crawled over to the piano and pressed a key. Then, another. Lila smiled. You like music? He looked at her. And for the first time, he whispered. More. Outside the door, Xavier heard everything. His face went pale. His hands trembled. But before he could enter, the boy shouted a word he hadn't uttered in 2 years. It wasn't more. It was, Papa. Xavier opened the door slowly. Mateo turned, eyes wide. Papa. Xavier dropped to his knees. But before he could touch his son, Mateo turned away, toward Lila. Play more, he said to her. And the CEO realized, in that moment, who had broken the silence. But Lila just stared back at him, one hand trembling over the piano, the other clutching the crust of her bread roll. She hadn't eaten all day. Mateo reached into his toy chest and pulled out a wrapped chocolate bar. He held it out to her. She didn't take it, because her eyes were fixed on Xavier, and what he was about to say next. He opened his mouth, but the door behind him slammed open, and a woman's voice echoed through the room. Who is this girl, Xavier? What the hell is going on? The woman stood in the doorway like a blade, sharp, rigid, and polished to perfection. Dressed in a crimson silk blouse and black slacks that gleamed under the chandelier's glow, she surveyed the room with cold precision. Her heels clicked on the floor as she stepped inside, each strike louder than the last. Xavier straightened. Elena, you weren't supposed to be back until Monday. I took the jet early, she replied, voice cool, deliberate. Her gaze fell on Lila, narrowed slightly. And I come home to find some street girl sitting on my son's carpet, holding his toy piano like a guest? Mateo flinched. Lila quickly stood up, brushing her hands against her coat. I was just. She's the one, Xavier interrupted. Mateo spoke. To her. For a second, the room held its breath. Elena blinked. Once. Then crossed her arms. That's not possible. It is, Xavier said quietly. He called me Papa, and then asked her to play again. Elena turned to Mateo. Darling, did you talk to this girl? The boy's eyes dropped to the floor. His fingers toyed with the hem of his shirt. He didn't answer. Xavier stepped closer to his wife. He did. I heard it myself. Lila stayed silent, shrinking slightly. Her fingers trembled, still holding the chocolate bar Mateo had offered. Elena frowned. Where is she from? Who are her parents? She comes to the gate. For food, Xavier replied. I've seen her before. She's a beggar, Elena said sharply. You let her into our house? She made our son speak. And how do you know it wasn't a coincidence? Elena's voice was rising. Maybe he was ready. Maybe it had nothing to do with her. She asked for leftovers, Xavier said, his voice turning to steel. That's all. I told her if she made Mateo talk, she could have them. Leftovers. Elena turned to Lila with quiet fury. You bargained my son's voice for scraps of food? I didn't mean any harm, Lila whispered. I just wanted something to bring home. My grandma's sick. She doesn't belong here, Elena snapped. But Xavier didn't move. He needs her. Mateo suddenly spoke, voice soft and cracked. She's nice. The air left Elena's lungs. Xavier turned to his son. Say that again. Mateo's eyes flicked to his mother, then back to Lila. She's nice. It was only 3 words. But to Xavier, it sounded like a thunderclap. To Elena, it was something else, defeat. For a moment, she stood there, rooted in disbelief. Then she adjusted the cuffs of her blouse. Fine, she said. She can come. For now. But I want her clean. Washed. Federal dressed properly. If she's going to be in my house, she will not look like she crawled out of a drainage pipe. Lila's face flushed with shame. Xavier turned to the butler standing silently near the door. Get her a room in the staff wing. Clean clothes. Hot food. The butler nodded. Lila opened her mouth to protest. She hadn't asked for any of that. She just wanted scraps. But Xavier stopped her with a look. You helped my son. Let me help you. She said nothing, just nodded, still gripping the chocolate bar like a lifeline. The room wasn't big, but it was warm. Too warm, almost. It had a small bed, a sink, a chair, and a folded pile of clothes, plain but new. A plate of hot food waited on the desk, grilled chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. She ate slowly, as if it might vanish if she wasn't careful. Later that evening, the housekeeper arrived. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a low voice. You're lucky, you know, she said while combing Lila's tangled hair. No one gets into this house without a background check. But you. Straight from the street to a room. That boy must like you. I didn't do anything special, Lila murmured. Doesn't matter. He spoke. That alone is a miracle. She finished braiding Lila's hair and left. But Lila couldn't sleep. Not with the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. She thought of her grandmother, curled in bed with her persistent cough, waiting for Lila to return. She hadn't gone home that night. Xavier had insisted she stay. His driver had promised to deliver food to her grandmother instead. She hoped he had. Morning came. A knock at her door. It was Xavier himself. You up? Lila nodded. Yes, sir. Mateo's asking for you. She followed him through the corridor, past a woman vacuuming the velvet rugs and a man polishing the gold-rimmed mirror at the end of the hallway. When they entered the playroom, Mateo ran to her, arms open. Lila froze. Then she slowly bent down, and he hugged her. I dreamed you didn't come back, he whispered. I'm here, she said, hugging him gently. Xavier turned away, blinking faster than usual. As the days passed, Mateo spoke more. Slowly, but steadily. Simple words. Small sentences. And always to her. Elena watched from a distance. Her lips pressed into a hard line. She did not smile. Not once. One afternoon, while Lila helped Mateo finish a puzzle, Elena entered the room and stood silently by the window. When Xavier walked in moments later, she turned to him. We need to talk. Alone. He followed her into the hallway, closing the door behind them. He's becoming attached to her, Elena said, voice low. He already is. She's not family, Xavier. She's a child from the street. We don't know anything about her. She hasn't asked for anything. That's worse, Elena snapped. People who ask are easier to control. She wants nothing, yet she holds our son in the palm of her hand. Xavier's voice dropped. What are you afraid of? Elena didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. I want her gone. Before this goes any further. You're too late, he replied. Mateo trusts her. She's the only one he listens to. Elena's eyes narrowed. Then I'll make her leave. She turned abruptly, heels clicking like gunfire down the hall. Inside the playroom, Lila looked up from the puzzle. Mateo whispered. Don't go. I won't, she said, smiling softly. But in her heart, she felt the pressure of something rising. Something dark. And outside the room, Elena was already making her first phone call, to someone who owed her a favor. Someone with the power to make a girl disappear without a trace. The phone call was brief. "Elena Calderon," the man answered, voice slick as oil. "I need a background check," she said coldly. Deep and fast. "Who's the target?" "A girl. Roughly 11 or 12. Name: Lila. No last name. No ID. She's been hanging around our gates for weeks." There was a pause. "That's not much to work with." "You'll figure it out," she said. "You always do." She ended the call before he could reply. Elena stood in her walk-in closet, staring at herself in the mirror. Her reflection didn't blink. It never did. Behind her perfect posture and painted lips was a woman who'd lost too much, too early, and had learned that control was the only defense against heartbreak. She would not allow some barefoot orphan with a buttered roll to disrupt the fragile balance they had built since the accident. Mateo was hers. And her son's soul would not be stitched back together by someone who didn't even belong inside the walls of their world. 2 days passed. Mateo was talking more now. He said good morning to the housekeeper, asked for seconds at lunch, and once, even laughed when Lila slipped on a rubber duck in the bathroom. Xavier had begun canceling meetings just to watch them together. It was like witnessing a thaw, his son melting back into life, word by word. Lila never asked for more than what he gave: food, clean clothes, time with Mateo. She declined when offered toys. Refused money. All she wanted was to be allowed to return each day. But the third night, the man Elena called finally reached out. He arrived in person. A smooth, angular man in a gray suit stepped into Xavier's private office and laid a file on the desk. Elena was already seated, her arms crossed, eyes fixed. "She's a ghost," the man said. "No birth records. No school. No ID. But I found a trace. About 8 years ago, a woman named Teresa Duarte filed a missing persons report for her granddaughter, Lila Duarte. Then canceled it a week later." "Why cancel?" Elena asked. "Because she was warned. A man came to her house. Told her if she made noise, she'd lose the girl permanently." Elena's brow twitched. "Go on." "Teresa was a nurse at a low-income clinic. I found her. She's dying. Advanced COPD. Bedridden. But her mind is clear. And the girl. She's been living with Teresa ever since. They hide. Move every few months." Elena stiffened. "Hiding from who?" The man hesitated. "Teresa wouldn't say. But I pulled the old clinic records. 8 years ago, she treated the wrong patient. A child who was meant to disappear. The clinic got torched the next month." Elena leaned forward slowly. "What child?" "Unclear," the man said. "The records are gone. All but one detail." He flipped open the file. A grainy photo, 2 nurses, a toddler, and a man with a serpent tattoo on his hand. "She saw something," the man continued. "Something they never wanted her to see." Elena's fingers clenched around the photo. "And now she's in my house. Do you want her gone?" Elena didn't answer. Not yet. Lila didn't know any of it. That morning, she and Mateo built a tower of books taller than both of them. When it fell, he howled with laughter. Xavier stood by the door, watching with an exhausted smile. "She's good for him," the housekeeper whispered beside him. "She's more than that," he replied. "She's what brought him back." Later that day, he brought Lila into his office. She entered hesitantly, fidgeting with her sleeves. "I wanted to ask you something," Xavier said gently. "About your grandmother." Lila froze. "I've been sending food to the address you gave. But no one answers the door. The driver says it's always locked. Quiet. Are you sure she's okay?" "She's just sick," Lila murmured. "She sleeps a lot." Do you want us to send a doctor? Lila shook her head quickly. No. She doesn't trust strangers. I take care of her. There was something guarded in her eyes. Something Xavier had seen in people who had lived through fire. All right, he said softly. But if that changes... She nodded and stepped back. Can I go back to Mateo? He let her leave. But her words lingered in his mind. Off balance. Too cautious. That evening, he made a decision. Get me the driver, he told the butler. I want to go myself. The apartment building was as sad as he'd imagined. Gray walls. Cracked windows. A broken elevator. Xavier climbed 5 flights, his body too used to boardrooms and sleek gym machines to handle the rawness of real stairs. Apartment 5C. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Louder. A shuffle. A cough. Then, slowly, the door opened just an inch. A frail woman in a thin nightgown peered out. Her eyes were sharp despite the deep wrinkles. She looked at him like he was a memory. You're not with the gas company. No, he said. I'm Xavier Calderon. I work with your granddaughter. Teresa's hand trembled. Is she all right? She's safe. Very safe. But I needed to see this. He gently pushed the door open wider. The apartment was small. Clean, despite the age. A hospital cot had been wheeled into the center of the room. Medical tubes. Oxygen tank. A tray with half-eaten crackers. She wouldn't let me bring a doctor, Xavier said softly. She's afraid, Teresa whispered. Afraid they'll find us again. Who? Teresa shook her head. It's not your burden. She's in my home. My family's life. That makes it my burden too. Teresa looked at him for a long time. Then she sat down, her breath wheezing. When Lila was 4, her mother ran. From the wrong people. The kind who don't leave loose ends. She dropped Lila on my doorstep in the middle of the night. Disappeared before sunrise. And her father? There is no father. Just men who wanted her mother dead. And anyone connected to her. Xavier's jaw tensed. Why is Lila still in danger? Because someone still wants the girl hidden, Teresa rasped. Because Lila may know something she doesn't remember. Or because they're still afraid of her mother. Is she alive? I don't know, Teresa whispered. But if they learn Lila is back in public, in a powerful family's home, she gripped his wrist. They won't let her live. Xavier's heart pounded. He returned to the mansion in silence. Lila was asleep in Mateo's playroom, curled up on a blanket. Mateo had built a pillow fort around her, as if guarding her dreams. Xavier stood there a long time. Then he turned and left the room. At dawn, Elena found him staring at the security footage. She's in danger, he said without looking up. Real danger. I know, Elena replied quietly. He turned sharply. What? I know who she is, she said. I had her traced. Xavier's voice dropped into a low growl. You put her at risk? I protected our son, Elena snapped. What if they're watching her? What if they use Mateo to get to her? You think I'll let that happen? He stared at her, unreadable. And then the alarm blared. Motion sensors. Back gate. Elena and Xavier raced to the control room. The screen flickered. A shadow slipped through the trees. Too fast. Too deliberate. Not random. Not a thief. Someone who knew the grounds. Xavier's voice turned to ice. Where's Lila? He demanded. The butler answered faintly. She was in the garden with Mateo. Xavier ran. But when he reached the garden, Mateo was alone. And Lila was gone. The garden was too quiet. Xavier's breath caught in his throat as he scanned the hedges, the winding paths, the ivy-covered pergola where Mateo liked to sit and read. The boy stood barefoot in the grass, his tiny fists clenched, trembling. "Mateo," Xavier said, kneeling. "Where is she?" The boy's eyes welled. He pointed. "Man took her." Xavier looked up. "What kind of man?" Mateo tried to speak, but the words tangled in panic. He shook his head violently, as if trying to erase the memory. She screamed. That was all Xavier needed. "Lock down the estate," he barked into his phone. "Activate the perimeter cameras. No one in, no one out." He turned back to Mateo, who was now sitting on the ground, rocking slightly. Xavier crouched, lifting him into his arms. "I'll find her," he whispered. "I promise." Downstairs, Elena paced in the surveillance room, eyes flicking between camera feeds. "They cut the wires near the rear trail," she said. "System glitched at exactly 5:06 a.m. Xavier strode in, his voice like thunder. "They knew what they were doing." "I told you," she snapped. "Bringing that girl in here was a mistake." He ignored her. "Send me the footage. Every second before the system went down. And get Marcus from security. Tell him to pull the gate logs for the last 24 hours. The security chief entered moments later, jaw tight. "One van came through the service road last night. License plate was fake. Drove off just before the alarm tripped. Driver wore a mask. But the height, build, military." Xavier's face darkened. "Whoever it was didn't come for money. They came for her." Elena folded her arms. "Then maybe she's not who we thought." Xavier didn't answer. He was already dialing. "Dante," he said when the call picked up, "I need a tracker. A good one." Lila awoke to darkness. Her hands were tied. Her mouth gagged. She was lying on cold metal, the floor of a moving van. The scent of oil and sweat filled her nose. Her head throbbed from the blow that had taken her down. She remembered Mateo screaming. She remembered trying to fight back. Then, nothing. The van rattled over gravel, then slowed. Voices, doors, boots. Lila's pulse pounded. She closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Rough hands yanked her up. She was dragged into a dimly lit room, a warehouse, maybe. The walls were lined with crates. The floor stained with oil. A man stood in front of her. Clean-shaven, mid-40s, wearing black gloves and a gold chain with a serpent charm. "Well," he said, tilting her chin with a gloved finger. "You've grown." Lila flinched. He smiled. "You don't remember me, do you?" She shook her head, heart racing. "That's okay. I remember you." He turned to another man standing by the wall. "Call the client. Tell them we have the girl." "What about the family?" "They don't know who she is yet. But once they do, they'll understand why she can't be part of it." Lila's mind spun. What was she part of? Who was this client? And what did they want with a girl who had only ever asked for leftover food? Back at the mansion, Xavier paced like a caged animal. Mateo sat in his mother's lap, silent again, staring at the floor. "I want a satellite scan of every abandoned structure within 30 miles, Xavier said. "And I want roadblocks on every outbound path. Police, private teams, hell, even drones." "Are you going to tell them who she really is?" Elena asked quietly. Xavier turned slowly. "Do you know who she really is?" Elena said nothing. The door opened. A tall man with a scar down his cheek entered. Leather jacket, boots, eyes like cold steel. "Dante," Xavier said. "Thanks for coming. Your guy said the girl was taken by pros. They got past my security like it was tissue paper." Dante dropped a duffel on the table. "Then it's not just about the girl. It's about leverage. Against me. Maybe. Or someone else who wants her hidden." Xavier hesitated. Her grandmother said they've been hiding for 8 years. That someone wanted her mother silenced. Dante looked up. You think this is cartel? I think it's bigger. Dante pulled out a map. We start with the roads. Vans don't fly. They turn. They stop. They leave heat. Give me her clothes. Something she wore recently. We'll run a scent track with the dogs. Matteo suddenly stood up. I know the van. Everyone froze. Xavier crouched. Matteo. The boy nodded slowly. Black. Big. Has a dent. On the side. Driver had gloves. Snake tattoo. Elena went pale. Xavier stood, his voice low and dangerous. Serpent charm. Dante's eyes narrowed. That's not random. I've seen it before, Xavier muttered. At a gala. A man with that exact chain. Said he was in logistics. Had a daughter who had disappeared overseas. Said she ran away. What was his name? Xavier clenched his jaw. Luca Marin. Dante paused. That's not just logistics. That's black market transport. People. Weapons. Anything with a price tag. And if he's involved, Xavier said, he's not just moving Lila. He's selling her. Matteo grabbed his father's hand. We have to go now. Hours later, in a warehouse near the docks, Lila sat tied to a chair. Luca Marin made another call. She's alive, he said into the phone. What do you want me to do with her? The voice on the other end was faint. Distorted. No deals, it hissed. No ransom. No witnesses. Luca blinked. You want her gone? The line crackled. Burn everything. He hung up. Turned to the man beside him. Gas the place. Then torch it. Lila's eyes went wide. No one's supposed to know who she was, Luca said softly, more to himself than anyone else. She should have died years ago. He walked out, his boots echoing. Lila struggled, teeth grinding against the gag. Her wrists bled from the ropes. The scent of gasoline stung her nose. One of the men poured it across the floor like it was water. Then he lit a match. And smiled. As flames burst to life behind him, Lila screamed into the gag. Just as the sidewall of the warehouse exploded inward. The explosion tore through the warehouse like a thunderclap, blowing in sheets of smoke, fire, and twisted metal. One wall crumbled in a storm of brick and debris, crushing crates and sending bodies flying. The match dropped from the thug's fingers, clattering harmlessly to the floor. Lila blinked through the haze, the roar still ringing in her ears. Figures emerged from the smoke, black-clad, masked, and armed. Tactical gear. No emblems. No warnings. They moved with the lethal calm of men trained to kill. Dante was at the front. Eyes on the girl, he shouted. 2 tangos west wall, 3 on the catwalk. Move. Gunfire cracked. Muffled yells followed. Someone screamed. A man tried to flee out the back, but a dart from a silenced rifle dropped him before he reached the exit. Lila sat frozen, smoke swirling around her, her rope singed but still tight. Her ears rang, heart slamming against her ribs. Then, a pair of gloved hands grabbed her. A knife sliced the ropes. She flinched, but the voice was calm. You're safe. We've got you. Dante. He lifted her gently, cradled her like a broken thing. We need to go now, he muttered. Before this place comes down. Behind them, fire raced along the line of spilled gasoline. Smoke reached the rafters. The warehouse groaned like it knew its time had come. Dante carried her out through the jagged hole his team had blasted in the wall. Outside, armored vehicles waited in the shadows of shipping containers. Engines idled, ready. Status, he barked. 2 detained. 1 injured. The rest, ash. One of his men replied. What about Luca Marin? He's gone. Dante swore under his breath and looked down at Lila. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling. He was going to kill me, she whispered. Not anymore, he said. "We've got you now." But as they climbed into the vehicle, and the fire behind them swallowed the building whole, Dante couldn't help but wonder, who wanted her dead badly enough to burn a witness alive instead of silencing her quietly? Who was Lila, really? The van sped through the night. Lila sat wrapped in a wool blanket, hands bandaged, head resting against Dante's arm. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. Just breathed, quietly, shallowly, like someone who still wasn't sure she'd survived. They arrived at a gated estate nestled in the hills. Not Xavier's, not safe enough, Dante had said. This place was off the grid. Untraceable. Xavier was waiting in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, pacing like a man on the edge of collapse. When the van doors opened, and he saw her, he dropped the phone. Lila. She stepped down slowly. He rushed forward, wrapping his arms around her, holding her like something too fragile to touch but too precious to let go. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I should have protected you." She didn't answer, but her arms slowly curled around his back. Behind them, Elena stood silently. Her eyes didn't soften, but she nodded once. "She's safe now," she said. Lila looked at her, and for the first time, Elena didn't look away. Later, in a quiet room, Lila sat curled up on a bed, sipping warm broth from a mug. Matteo had refused to sleep until she returned. Now he was at her side, head on her shoulder. Xavier sat across from them, hands clasped. "Do you know why they took you?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "They said I was supposed to die a long time ago." "Do you remember anything? From before your grandmother took you in?" "I remember a woman. She smelled like cinnamon. She sang to me." "Your mother?" "I think so." "What else?" "She used to hold me tight when I cried. Said there were bad people out there who wanted to make her disappear. One night, she left. I never saw her again." Xavier leaned forward. "Do you remember her name?" Lila blinked. "Celia." The name struck him like a blow. He stood, walking to the window, gripping the frame. "Celia Duarte," he whispered. "I knew her. 10 years ago. She was a compliance officer at one of our partner firms." He turned to Elena. "She uncovered something. A trail of illegal arms shipments buried in our logistics files. She came to me. I told her to go to the authorities. And then," Elena asked, "she vanished." He sat down heavily. "I thought she'd fled. I thought she was scared. But now," Elena finished the thought, "someone made her disappear. And now they want her daughter gone too," Xavier said grimly. "To erase the last loose thread." Dante stepped in, holding a small hard drive. "We recovered this from the warehouse. Labeled, Celia. Proof." It was in a lockbox under one of the crates. Xavier plugged it into his laptop. The screen lit up with grainy videos, emails, documents, names, bank accounts, invoices for illegal arms shipments routed through fake charities and humanitarian groups. Years of data. And at the bottom, a single file, Final Confession, CD. Xavier opened it. Celia's face appeared. Tired. Haunted. "If you're watching this," she said softly, "I'm gone. But my daughter is alive. And someone will come for her." Lila stared, breath frozen. "They'll tell you she doesn't matter. That she's a mistake. But she's more than that. She's the reason I didn't give up. She's the reason I told the truth." Celia looked into the camera. "Protect her." The screen went black. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Xavier stood. "We need to release this," he said. "Everything. The files, the video. If we bury it, they'll never stop hunting her." Dante looked at him. "You'll be making powerful enemies. They already tried to kill a child. I don't care who they are." Elena crossed her arms. "Then we do it right. We go public. Legal. Loud. Xavier nodded. Prepare everything. He looked at Lila, who sat quietly holding Mateo's hand. We're not just protecting you, he said. We're fighting back. And just as he spoke, a bullet shattered the window behind him. The lights went out. And the house plunged into darkness. Glass sprayed the room like diamonds as the bullet tore through the window, embedding itself in the wooden paneling beside Xavier's head. He dove instinctively, grabbing Lila and Mateo, pulling them to the floor. Elena, he shouted. I'm fine, she called from across the room, crouched behind a chair. Who the hell fires a silenced shot through bulletproof glass? They knew where to aim, Dante growled, dragging a tactical vest over his shoulders and chambering around into his rifle. That wasn't a warning. That was a kill shot. He yanked the curtains shut and switched off the lamp, plunging the room into shadows. Red emergency lighting flickered on overhead as a siren began to wail through the house. Panic room now, Xavier barked. No time, Dante snapped. We move, they move faster. Extraction's our best bet. I've got a fallback team half a mile out. Xavier lifted Mateo into one arm and grabbed Lila's hand with the other. What do they want? The data. Her. They don't care, Dante said. They just want this buried. Girl, files, witnesses, everything. They ran. Down a service stairwell, past rows of flickering sconces and echoing alarms. Elena followed closely, her face white but composed, pistol gripped tightly in her hand. Lila's legs burned as they descended flight after flight. Mateo clung to his father's neck, silent but wide-eyed. Where's your fallback? Xavier asked. Through the west orchard. But we'll have to cross open ground. Snipers? Elena asked. Most likely. Dante stopped at the bottom floor, checking the feed from his wrist display. 2 heat signatures just breached the perimeter. Fast. High training. Headed for the main wing. We were bait, Elena murmured. No, Xavier said grimly. She was. He turned to Lila. We're not letting them take you again. You understand me? She nodded, breathing hard. Her lip was bleeding from where she'd bitten it, but she didn't complain. She never did. Dante opened a utility door and led them through a low tunnel that opened into a greenhouse. Hold here, he said, signaling the fallback team on his headset. I've got the package. Extraction point Bravo in 2 minutes. Suddenly, gunfire. Muffled at first. Then louder. Closer. Someone was shooting inside the house. Too late, Dante muttered. They're in. He turned to Elena and Xavier. Hold the kids. We clear the path. Dante cracked the greenhouse door open slightly. 2 shooters near the fountain. No thermal cloaks. They're expecting panic, not a fight. Give me the left, Elena said. Dante blinked. Since when do you give me the left? He nodded. They moved like synchronized shadows. A whisper of cloth. A breath of movement. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped without a sound. Dante gestured. Go. Now. Xavier ran first, clutching Mateo, followed by Lila, her heart hammering with every step. Elena brought up the rear, her breath controlled, her eyes scanning. The orchard trees shimmered in the moonlight, beautiful and deadly. The extraction vehicle, a matte black SUV with no plates, sat idling just beyond the treeline. But as they neared it, a flash of movement caught Dante's eye. He tackled Lila to the ground, just as a bullet sliced through the air where her head had been. Sniper! He yelled. The SUV's doors burst open. 2 men with automatic rifles returned fire. Dante rolled, dragging Lila behind a low wall. 3 o'clock ridge, he shouted into his mic, suppress and move. The fallback team fired flares. Smoke hissed and exploded into the orchard. A curtain of fog lit in red. Run, Dante hissed to Lila. Don't look back. She didn't. She followed Xavier through the fog, lungs aching, legs screaming, every step a test of will. They reached the SUV. Matteo was shoved inside first. Xavier turned, covering them. Lila scrambled in beside the boy, only to look back and see Elena stumble. Blood on her leg. "Elena!" Xavier roared. But she waved them off. "Go." A second vehicle roared in from the left, black and windowless. "Not theirs." Dante Dove, firing into the windshield. Glass spiderwebbed, and the van swerved, crashing into a tree. "Go, go, go!" someone screamed. The fallback driver hit the pedal. Tires screeched. The SUV surged forward. Xavier reached for Elena, but she was already raising her weapon again, limping toward the treeline, covering them with bullets. She was buying them time. Lila turned in her seat, tears streaming silently down her face, as Elena disappeared behind the smoke and fire. 20 minutes later, they reached an abandoned airstrip outside city limits. No lights. No signs. Just a private jet waiting with its engines humming. Dante was already giving orders into his radio. Evac confirmed. Casualties, 1 wounded, status unknown. No fatalities on our side. Xavier sat on the tarmac, Matteo in his lap, Lila wrapped in a blanket beside them. "They won't stop," she whispered. "No," Xavier said. "They won't." "Why?" He looked at her with quiet, heavy eyes. "Because your mother told the truth. And the people she exposed never forgave her." Dante walked over. "We go dark now. Lila leaves the country." "No," she said suddenly, her voice firmer than they expected. "I'm not hiding again." Xavier turned slowly. "Lila, if I run, they win. That's what they want. For me to vanish like she did." Silence. Then Matteo reached over, took her hand, and nodded. "She stays with us," Xavier said. "We don't run. We fight." Dante frowned. "You sure?" Xavier stood. "You saw the data. Once it goes public, the tide turns. They can't silence what's already known. But you'll be a target too." "I already am." He looked down at Lila. And smiled. "But I have someone worth fighting for." Back at the mansion, emergency crews poured over the grounds. The fire was contained. The bodies were tagged. But one question burned louder than all others. Elena Calderon, where was she? Rescue teams scoured the woods until dawn. They found her gun first. Then blood. Then a piece of her blouse torn on a thorn bush. But no body. No sign of death. Just missing. Xavier stared at the report, knuckles white. Dante stood beside him. She could still be alive. Xavier didn't answer. But he felt it in his bones. If Elena was out there, she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. And somewhere, in the shadows of a broken empire, a new plan was already forming. Because the people who had tried to bury the truth had just made one fatal mistake. They left a mother alive. They said she couldn't have survived. The explosion that ripped through the orchard had thrown shards of glass and flame across the entire western wing of the estate. The trees themselves had blackened and collapsed. Gunfire and smoke had blanketed the night. But 24 hours later, deep in the forest, beneath a shattered root system and charred moss, Elena Calderon opened her eyes. Her leg was soaked in blood. Her ribs felt cracked. Her vision blurred. But she was alive. Her pistol was gone. So was her phone. But the one thing she did not lose was focus. She crawled. Pain was irrelevant. Thoughts of Xavier and Matteo burned through her every nerve. And Lila, that strange, stubborn girl who'd somehow torn through Matteo's silence and into all their hearts. If Elena had been suspicious before, she wasn't now. Lila had nearly died, again. Because someone believed a child could still burn down a secret built by men in suits and smoke-filled rooms. Elena gritted her teeth and stood, swaying. And she began to walk. At the Calderon estate, Xavier was already mobilizing. The files had been duplicated. The video testimony secured. 3 encrypted drives had been sent, one to a trusted journalist in London, one to a former judge in Buenos Aires, and the third to a contact Xavier hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, a war crimes investigator who owed him a favor. Dante stood by the window, watching a black SUV pull up the gravel path. "They're early," he muttered. "Who?" Lila asked, seated quietly beside Mateo at the breakfast table. "Interpol." Xavier adjusted his tie. "They're sending a contact to validate the evidence and issue a formal protection order for you and Mateo." Lila glanced at Mateo. "He's not in danger anymore, right?" Xavier's smile was faint. "He is. Because you are. And because someone, whoever's behind this, knows the fastest way to silence one witness is to terrify another." Dante spoke up. "I ran facial matches from the warehouse footage. One man, possible ex-military, foreign. But one other, one we didn't catch, showed up on Interpol's red list 3 years ago. Alias only." "Alias?" Xavier asked. Dante nodded. "Goes by Cashin. Real name unknown. Operative level. Dirty cleanup specialist. When people like Luca Marin need silence, he's the whisper behind it." "And he's still out there?" Dante handed Xavier a folder. "Not just out there. He's in country. Arrived 2 weeks ago under diplomatic cover." "From where?" Dante hesitated. "Carbosa." Xavier exhaled slowly. Carbosa was a rogue state masquerading as a government. A place where fugitives went to retire and warlords vacationed with impunity. It was also where Celia Duarte had traced the weapons deals, 8 years ago. Everything was circling back. Lila sat by the piano that night, her fingers lightly touching the keys. Mateo leaned beside her, humming quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just thinking. About your mom?" "Yeah." Mateo said nothing for a moment. Then, "I hope she sees you. On TV. If they show the video. I hope she knows you're safe." Lila turned to him. "I hope she's alive." He smiled softly. "She has to be. Because you are." They sat in silence. Until Lila whispered, "I think they're going to try again." Mateo looked at her. "Something feels wrong," she continued. "Like someone's still watching." She turned to the window. The curtains were drawn. But behind them, she saw it. The flicker of red. A camera laser. She jumped up. "Get Xavier." Dante burst into the room seconds later, already pulling out his pistol. "Where?" "There." She pointed. "Top left corner of the window." He threw the curtain open. Too late. The light was gone. But a small device stuck to the window frame blinked once, and exploded. Glass shattered. Smoke flooded the room. Dante dove over the children, shielding them with his body. The lights died. Again. Chaos returned. 15 minutes later, as the smoke cleared and Mateo was rushed to a safer wing, Xavier stood in the garden beside the shattered piano room, knuckles bloodied from punching the wall. "That was a warning," Dante said grimly. "Could have killed all 3. Xavier turned. "Any word from the perimeter?" "No sign. No prints. Just a thermal ghost." "Which means they're inside our systems." Dante nodded. "We need to move them," Xavier said. "Tonight. Off-grid. Not even you and I will know the route until the last second. I'll prep the transport." Xavier looked back at the cracked floor, where just hours earlier his son and Lila had been sitting. He'd thought they were safe. He'd been wrong. Again. Midnight. An unmarked vehicle drove up a winding road through the mountains. In the back seat, Lila sat between Dante and Mateo. The boy had fallen asleep on her shoulder. Lila stared into the darkness, each twist of the road curling her stomach tighter. Dante checked his watch. "We change cars in 3 minutes." No stops. No calls. You understand. Lila nodded. Mateo stirred but didn't wake. They reached the checkpoint. A black van was waiting. Unmarked. Tinted. Dante stepped out first, checking every angle. Then gestured to Lila. Quickly. She opened the door. Froze. The driver was already looking at her. And he had a scarred face. The last thing she saw before the dart hit her neck was the gold serpent charm around his wrist. Xavier's phone rang at exactly 1:06 a.m. He answered on the first buzz. Dante's voice came through, tight, ragged. They took her. What? Second vehicle was a fake. Driver was Cashin. He hit the driver with a paralytic. Took the girl. We didn't even see it coming. Xavier felt the world pitch. Mateo. He's safe. But Lila. Xavier's voice was a whisper now. They have her again. Dante said nothing. But Xavier already knew what needed to happen. He turned to the one screen in the house still working. Pulled up the broadcast control panel. Then he uploaded the files. Celia's video. The shipment manifests. Every name. Every document. And hit send to Global Media. Across the world, screens lit up. Breaking. Secret arms trafficking scandal. Evidence linked to disappeared whistleblower, Celia Duarte. Photos of Lila's face appeared. The testimony played. And in a hidden chamber, far from light, someone screamed in rage and smashed their monitor. Because now, the world knew. And the girl they had taken was no longer a secret. But even as headlines exploded, and governments scrambled for damage control, Lila opened her eyes in a cold room, chained to a chair. And across from her sat the man with the scarred face. Cashin. You've been very difficult, he said calmly. But I'm not here to kill you. He leaned forward. I'm here to make you forget. The room was ice cold. Concrete walls, a single dim bulb swinging overhead, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the floor. The metal chair beneath Lila creaked as she shifted, the chain at her ankle rattling softly. Her head still spun from the drug, but the fog was clearing, slowly, painfully. Across from her, Cashin sat motionless. No weapons visible. No raised voice. Just calm, clinical menace. You're awake, he said. Good. Lila stared back, eyes narrowed. Her mouth was dry, lips cracked. I know what you're thinking, he continued, folding his hands. You're asking why you're not dead. Why I went through all the trouble of taking you alive. Again. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. It's because they don't want you dead anymore. She flinched, confused. They want you erased. Cashin stood, walking slowly around her. You're a symbol now. That little video. That voice of your mother. He snorted. It made you into something dangerous. Not because of what you know, but because of who you are. Lila didn't respond. Cashin stopped behind her. They want you back in the shadows. No memory. No testimony. Just a harmless girl in a hospital bed who never speaks again. He stepped in front of her, pulling something from a case. A syringe. Clear liquid. Do you know what this is? He asked, almost gently. She shook her head. Benzotropine derivative. Alters the hippocampus. Destroys recent memory pathways. Works best in trauma patients. He smiled faintly. You'd forget Mateo. Xavier. Your mother's name. Even your own. He pressed the syringe lightly against her arm. But here's the real twist. You'll never know what you forgot. You'll just wake up. Empty. Lila's jaw trembled. Then she did something Cashin hadn't anticipated. She laughed. It was quiet, shaky, but real. He blinked. What's funny? You think you can erase me with one needle, she whispered. You think I'm just a folder on a hard drive? Her voice rose. You've already lost. Everyone saw the video. Everyone knows. Even if you make me forget, they won't. His expression darkened. And for the first time, he looked uncertain. Meanwhile, halfway across the world was watching. News anchors read Celia Duarte's name with reverence and outrage. Investigations launched overnight. Officials denied everything. Then resigned. Arrests were made. Protests filled the streets in Barbosa, Madrid, and Rio. And every photo shown of Lila, the girl at the center, showed her smiling beside Mateo, piano in the background, joy in her face. Xavier sat in a conference room in Geneva, speaking to a panel of investigators. "She's a child," he said. "And she gave up her safety to honor the truth her mother died for. She deserves protection, not pity." The panel nodded. One woman leaned forward. "We'll grant her asylum. Full immunity. International guardianship, if needed." But Xavier only nodded once. "She's more than a witness now. She's a target. And I don't think the people behind this are finished." Back in the cold room, Cashin had strapped Lila's arm to the chair. She struggled. Fought. But his grip was like stone. "This is mercy," he muttered. "You don't understand how big this is. What you're poking at. You think it's just weapons and money? No, little girl. It's ideology. Order. Power that's lasted for generations." She snarled. "Power built on silence." He gritted his teeth. "Exactly. And that's why it's going to fall." He hesitated. She looked him straight in the eye. "You're scared." Cashin didn't answer. Just raised the needle. Then the door blew off its hinges. A flashbang exploded in the room, flooding it with white light and deafening sound. Lila's ears rang. Her vision blurred. When the smoke cleared, Cashin was gone. And Elena Calderon stood in the doorway, pistol raised, blood on her cheek, one hand bracing her injured leg. "Let's go," she said. Lila's eyes widened. "You're alive." Elena grinned through the pain. "I always am." She limped forward, cutting the restraints, pulling Lila to her feet. "Can you run?" "I can fly," Lila breathed. They ran. Down a corridor that stank of mildew and rot. Emergency lights flashed overhead. Sirens in the distance. Gunfire erupted behind them. Elena spun, returning fire. 2 men dropped. Another fell before he even raised his weapon. Dante emerged from the smoke, weapon raised, headset crackling. "Package secured," he barked. "Team Alpha, collapse rear entry, now." Explosives detonated behind them. The hallway shook. They kept moving. At the end of the corridor, Xavier stood beside a waiting van, door open, face pale and furious. Lila sprinted into his arms. "You found me. I never stopped looking. Where's Mateo?" "Safe. With the Interpol team." Elena climbed into the front seat, breathing heavily. "Drive." They sped into the night, sirens fading behind them. Lila looked out the back window. For a brief moment, through the smoke and fire, Cashin stood watching. He didn't run. He didn't follow. Just watched. And smiled. 2 days later, Lila sat before a wall of microphones at a press conference in Geneva. She wore a simple white dress. Mateo stood beside her, holding her hand. Xavier sat behind them, Elena flanking the security teams. She took a deep breath. "My name is Lila Duarte," she said clearly, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I am the daughter of Celia Duarte." She told the truth. And they tried to erase her. Just like they tried to erase me. Reporters scribbled. Flashbulbs burst. They failed. And they will keep failing. Because truth doesn't vanish when you silence one voice. It grows. Louder. Stronger. The crowd erupted. Cameras rolled. And halfway across the world, in a bunker lined with steel and maps, Cashin watched. His scarred hand hovered over a case. Inside it, Another syringe. Another file. But this time, it wasn't Lila's name. It was Mateo Calderon. And Cashin, with his quiet, precise movements, clicked the case shut. The war, it seemed, was just beginning. The wind swept across the Swiss hills like a whisper of warning. Inside the fortified villa where the Calderons had taken refuge, the walls felt thick, the windows unbreakable. But Xavier Calderon knew better than most, security was never absolute. Especially not when your enemy didn't knock. That morning, Lila had laughed. It was a rare thing. Not the nervous giggle of survival, not the polite smile of someone pretending to be okay, but a real laugh. Mateo had just knocked over a bowl of blueberries with his sock puppet and called it an artistic protest. Xavier had leaned against the doorway, watching, arms folded. She looked like a normal child. She deserved to be one. But the laugh lingered in his head, too fragile, too fleeting. He couldn't enjoy it. Not fully. Not while he had the report from Dante sitting unread on his desk. Because last night, they'd intercepted chatter. Encrypted messages. Partial names. Mateo. A target. Not for abduction. Not for leverage. Something worse. An operation known as Shadow Vein. Xavier shut his office door and locked it. He opened the folder. Dante's handwriting, bold and sharp across the top. Project Nocturne, Retarget. Inside were grainy images from a Carbosa satellite station. One frame showed Cashin speaking to a shadowy figure. Facial recognition failed. But the report beneath it didn't mince words. They believe Lila has become too visible. Untouchable. Now, they shift the pressure. To the boy. They've studied his trauma. His regression. His dependency. And they believe if he falls, she will fracture. Quietly. Xavier sat back, breath caught in his throat. This wasn't about Lila anymore. It was about destroying her without touching her. Later that evening, Xavier summoned Elena and Dante. They sat in the steel-secured basement, far from microphones and cameras. Project Nocturne is real, Xavier said. Cashin's trying to break her through Mateo. Dante nodded. They call it emotional disintegration. Turn the asset's foundation into quicksand. I know what that does to people, Elena murmured. I've watched it. We need to disappear again, Xavier said. New identities. New location. No, Elena said. Xavier frowned. What? She stood, arms folded. If we keep running, we're telling them they're still in control. That Lila's bravery was a moment, not a movement. We're not risking the boy, Xavier said, voice rising. We're not, she replied, firm. We're preparing him. Dante raised an eyebrow. You want to train a child for psychological warfare? Elena turned to him. I want to shield him. With truth. With strength. With knowledge. That's how we survived. That's how she survives. Xavier closed his eyes, torn. Xavier, Elena said softly. If they think they can manipulate Lila through Mateo, then the answer isn't retreat. She looked him in the eye. It's making them both stronger than they ever imagined. 2 weeks passed. The villa transformed. Security doubled. But more importantly, education began. Mateo didn't learn to shoot. He learned to see patterns, faces, movements in reflections, how to stay calm under pressure, how to notice lies disguised as kindness. And Lila, she began therapy. Not the soft, how do you feel? Kind, but real deconstruction. A woman named Yvette, once a profiler for intelligence services, spoke to her like an equal. Fear isn't the enemy, Yvette said during their first session. The lie fear tells you, that you're helpless, that's the real threat. Lila wrote that down. She never forgot it. Then came the envelope. It arrived without stamps. No return address. Just one word on the front. For Mateo. Xavier opened it with gloves. Inside, 3 photos. One of Lila, asleep. One of Mateo at the breakfast table. And one of Teresa Duarte, Lila's grandmother. In a hospital bed. Eyes closed. Tubes removed. Sheet over her face. No words. Just the implication. They had found her. Lila read the note without crying. She folded the photo gently, smoothed the creases. Then stood and walked to the window. They want me broken, she said. But they keep forgetting something. What's that? Elena asked. She already told me goodbye. That night, the cameras went dark. Dante caught it instantly. EMP surge, he hissed. Short range. They're close. The villa's power flickered, then failed entirely. Emergency lights blinked red. Xavier grabbed Mateo. Elena took Lila's hand. Move. Basement vault. Now. They didn't make it 10 steps. A grenade detonated outside the east wall, non-lethal, but blinding. Smoke flooded the corridor. Shouting echoed. They're inside. Dante yelled. Through the haze, shadows moved, tall, swift, masked. Elena pulled Lila to the floor, shielding her. But Mateo, he froze. A figure stepped from the smoke. Cassian. Calm. Unrushed. He looked down at the boy. Hello, Mateo. Mateo didn't move. Remember me? Cassian asked. Lila lunged, but someone grabbed her, threw her back. Cassian crouched to Mateo's level. You don't know it yet, but your silence was beautiful, pure. And now you speak because someone taught you. He smiled. We're going to unteach you. Mateo stared. Then. No. Cassian blinked. What? Mateo stepped back, defiant. You don't scare me. Cassian's smile faltered. You're just a shadow. Suddenly, gunfire erupted. Dante's team breached the hallway behind them. Flashlights, commands, the scream of steel against steel. Cassian turned. A bullet grazed his arm. He vanished into smoke. Lila grabbed Mateo's hand and ran. Back into the vault. Into the arms of Xavier. The doors sealed. But the damage had been done. Cassian had been inside. Seen them. Touched the boy. Planted the seed. And somewhere, in the smoke-choked halls of the retreating strike team, a tablet screen blinked to life. A live feed. Of another child. Somewhere else. Same age. Same face. A boy who looked just like Mateo. Only this one. Was not safe. Cassian's voice echoed softly through the feed. If breaking her through the boy doesn't work, we'll try the inverse. And behind him, a new door opened. A new project. Twin flame. The room was lit by fluorescent strips and smelled faintly of antiseptic and machine oil. Deep underground, below a facility scrubbed from every known registry, a boy sat perfectly still, eyes unblinking, posture exact. He was dressed in the same clothes Mateo wore the day he spoke his first word to Lila, a navy sweater, white collar, gray trousers. His hands rested on his knees. His face bore no expression. Just stillness. A mirror stood before him. Behind it, Cassian watched. How long has he been like this? A voice asked from the shadows. 2 years, Cassian replied. No speech. No reaction. They called it selective mutism. But we reconditioned him. To what end? Cassian smiled faintly. To be the ghost in her mirror. The voice was skeptical. You're saying this boy is a double? Biologically, no. But psychologically. Cassian tapped the glass. He mirrors Mateo in every known behavior. Same gestures. Same tick when he's nervous. Same patterns of silence and motion. And the goal. Cassian turned, eyes gleaming. Infiltration. Collapse. Break Lila's instincts. Break her judgment. Break her truth. If she doesn't know who to trust, Even the boys she fought to protect, she collapses from the inside. He folded his hands behind his back. We don't need to kill her. We just need to fracture her. Permanently. In Geneva, the villa had become a fortress. Security specialists rotated every 8 hours. Dante slept in 2-hour increments. Elena drilled both children daily. Psychological readiness, escape drills, even symbolic decision-making. If everyone tells you something is true, but your heart says it's wrong, who do you listen to? Matteo always answered the same. Myself. Lila watched him like a hawk. He was strong. But he was still a child. She'd seen what they were capable of. What Cashin had done once. What he could do again. And when she dreamed, she saw smoke. Always smoke. And a single voice whispering, "You're running out of time." Then came the phone. Untraceable. Burned into the villa's dead drop. It rang once. Dante answered. No one spoke. Then, "I'm sending you a gift." Click. The phone fried in his hand, overloaded with voltage. Dante stood frozen. What now? Xavier asked. We shut down. But it was already too late. 1 hour later, a package arrived. No courier. No signature. Inside, a video drive. And a handwritten note. Let the girl choose. They loaded it in the secured room. The screen flickered. And then Lila saw him. Matteo. Standing in a gray hallway. Silent. His face pale. His hair ruffled. But his eyes. Wrong. Off by degrees she couldn't explain. The way he stood. The way his chest rose when he breathed. The silence. It wasn't his silence. And yet, if she hadn't known better. Is that him? Xavier asked softly. Matteo stood beside him, watching the screen. He frowned. That's not me. Are you sure? Elena asked gently. Matteo didn't blink. He stands like Cashin. Lila inhaled sharply. She stepped forward. Pause it, she said. They froze the frame. She pointed. Look at his left hand. Everyone leaned in. Subtle, but there, a faint red mark. A training scar. Matteo had fallen on that hand last month. It had left a jagged pink line. The boy on the screen didn't have it. Lila looked at the real Matteo. Then back to the screen. That's a fake. Or a weapon, Xavier murmured. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She sat in the library, tracing her fingers across a photo of her mother. Celia's smile was soft, eyes bright with defiance even in stillness. Elena told me I should be proud, she whispered. That I'm doing what you started. The wind rattled the windows. But some days, I wish you hadn't. She looked down at her hands. I'm tired of being the girl who survived. Behind her, the fireplace crackled. Then, footsteps. She turned sharply. Matteo stood in the doorway. Hey, he said. Couldn't sleep. She smiled. Join the club. He padded in barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. But something felt off. He sat beside her. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Just wanted to see you. He didn't look at her when he said it. She blinked. Say something in Spanish, she whispered. What? Say something. Anything. Matteo hesitated. I don't speak Spanish, he said. Lila stood so fast she knocked the chair over. You do. We've spoken it before. The boy looked confused. Terrified. Lila, wait. But she was already backing away. Then she turned. Ran. Down the hallway. To Matteo's room. She burst through the door. And there, sleeping, was the real Matteo. She turned slowly. The boy who had followed her into the library was standing behind her. No longer pretending. Cashin's voice echoed down the hall. You should have chosen the lie, Lila. Chaos erupted. The imposter lunged. Lila ducked, grabbed a lamp, swung. It shattered on the boy's arm. He didn't cry, didn't flinch, just kept coming. Dante arrived a second later. 3 shots to the boy's legs. He fell, didn't scream, but still tried to crawl. What is he? Dante hissed. A child, Lila whispered. Raised like a tool. Cashin's voice came through the house intercom. So what will you do, Lila? Kill him. He's just a mirror. He didn't choose this. Xavier shouted. Trace that signal. I already did, Dante snapped. It's coming from inside the house. Lila knelt by the boy. He stared up at her. For a moment, she saw not a monster, but a boy. Lost. Empty. She touched his forehead gently. I'm sorry. Then turned to Dante. Sedate him. We're not like them. Dante nodded. They found Cashin in the wine cellar. He didn't fight. He raised his hands. Smiling. Came to see it myself, he said. To see if she was truly unbreakable. He looked at Lila as the agents swarmed him. You are. She stared back. No, she said softly. I'm just done running. In the weeks that followed, the world watched the trial of Cashin and his backers. The truth unraveled like poison thread. Illegal human experimentation. Identity erasure. Psychological manipulation on children. Lila testified. So did Mateo. So did the boy with no name, now given one by Lila herself, Gabriel. He chose to stay, to learn who he was, not who he was told to be. Years later, the story of Celia Duarte and her daughter Lila was taught in classrooms, written in law books, etched into stone. But the most powerful memory didn't come from the headlines. It came from a moment no one saw. When Mateo, now 14, handed Lila a small wooden train. The same one he'd first rolled to her years ago in a silent room. You made me talk, he said. She smiled. You made me fight. And together, they never stopped speaking again.